I want to ask you something. Are you waiting to be perfect before you feel proud of yourself? Waiting until you speak without any mistakes, until your grammar is flawless, until your pronunciation is perfect, until every sentence comes out exactly right, and until then, nothing feels good enough. Every lesson that ends with a mistake feels like a failed lesson. Every conversation that included a wrong word feels like a bad conversation. Every week where you did not study every single day feels like a wasted week. Nothing is ever quite enough because perfection has not arrived yet. But here is something important. Perfection is not the goal, progress is. One small step forward every day. Not perfect, just forward. Not flawless, just better than yesterday. The person who speaks imperfect English confidently is more capable than the person who knows perfect English but never speaks. The student who studies 20 imperfect minutes every morning is growing faster than the student who waits for the perfect 2-hour session that never comes. Progress, small, real, daily. Imperfect progress is the only path to anything worth having. Today's story is about a young man named Elias. Elias was a perfectionist. He wanted to be right before he tried. He wanted to be good before he practiced. He wanted to be ready before he began until someone showed him what he was losing. This is his story. Meet Elias. Elias was 24 years old. He worked as a junior accountant at a small firm. Numbers, spreadsheets, reports. He was careful and precise. He double-checked everything. He did not submit a report until he was certain it was correct. This carefulness served him well at work, but it was destroying his English. He had been studying English for 10 months. Every session, he took careful notes. He reviewed vocabulary until he was certain he had memorized it. He did not move to the next grammar lesson until he felt he had fully mastered the current one. He was thorough, methodical, precise, and terribly painfully slow. 10 months of careful study, and he was still on the intermediate level, roughly where he'd been after the first 3 months before the carefulness had set in fully. Because here is what the perfectionism was doing. Every time he was not sure of a word, he did not use it. He waited until he was certain. Every time a grammar rule felt slightly unclear, he did not practice it. He studied it more first. Every time someone invited him to speak English, he declined. He was not ready yet. And readiness, the full, certain, mistake-free readiness he was waiting for, never quite arrived. Because it never does. Not before practice, only through it. His friend Daniel, a calm, experienced English speaker, saw what was happening. What Daniel said. Daniel was 30 years old. He had learned 3 languages. He was practical about language learning in the way that people are when they have actually done it. He and Elias were having coffee one afternoon. Elias had just declined an invitation to join a group conversation in English, saying he was not ready yet. Daniel looked at him. "You have been learning English for 10 months," he said. "Yes," said Elias. "And you are not ready to have a conversation?" "My grammar still has gaps," said Elias. "I make mistakes. I want to be more confident before I start speaking with people." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Elias, do you know how I became fluent in my second language?" Elias waited. "By speaking it badly for 2 years," said Daniel. "By making hundreds of mistakes, by saying wrong things and being corrected and trying again. By having terrible conversations that slowly became less terrible and then eventually became good." He put his cup down. "There is no path to good English that goes around the bad English. You have to go through it. The mistakes are not obstacles to speaking. They are the speaking. They are how it works." He looked at Elias steadily. "You are not waiting until you are ready. You are waiting for something that does not come before practice. It only comes from practice." Lesson 1. Good enough to try that evening, Elias sat at home and thought about what Daniel had said. There is no path to good English that goes around the bad English. He thought about 10 months of careful, precise, methodical study, about all the things he had not done because he was not ready yet. He had not spoken English with real people. Not once, not in 10 months. He had not used vocabulary words until he was certain of them, which meant many words had sat in his notes. learned but unused. He had not moved quickly through grammar. He had stayed on each point until it felt solid, which meant he had covered less ground than he could have. And after 10 months, his English felt like a building with very strong foundations and almost no walls, solid at the base, but not yet livable. He thought about what progress actually meant. Not perfect, not ready, not certain, just better than yesterday, just one step forward from where he was, good enough to try, not good enough to be perfect, good enough to try. He made one decision that evening. He was going to start using his English imperfectly, uncertainly, with mistakes before he felt ready. He was going to choose progress over perfection. Daily English sentences. Repeat after me. Progress means better than yesterday, not perfect today. Good enough to try is good enough to begin. There is no path to good English that goes around the bad English. I use the words I am not certain of. That is how I learn them. I speak before I am fully ready. That is how speaking improves. Mistakes are not obstacles, they are the path. I choose progress every day over perfection. Lesson 2, the imperfect practice. The next morning, Elias did something different. Instead of his usual careful, precise study session, he spent 15 minutes just speaking out loud in his room to nobody. He described his morning, he talked about his work, he said what he was planning to do that day in English, without stopping to check grammar, without looking up words, without making sure each sentence was correct before saying it. He just talked. Some sentences were wrong. He could feel it as they came out. A wrong tense, a word that was not quite right, a sentence that ran on too long and lost itself. He kept going. 15 minutes of imperfect, unpolished, uncertain English. When he finished, he sat quietly for a moment. He felt something he had not felt in 10 months of careful studying, like he had actually used the language, not just studied it, used it. Like English was something he had held in his hands, awkwardly, imperfectly, rather than something he had observed carefully from a distance. The difference was real and immediate. He added this to his daily routine. 15 minutes of careful study, 15 minutes of just speaking to himself about anything without stopping for perfection. Imperfect speaking practice. Every morning. The careful side of him hated it. The growing side of him needed it. Daily English sentences. Repeat after me. I speak for 15 minutes every morning, imperfectly and freely. I do not stop to check grammar. I just keep speaking. Using the language is different from studying it. I need both. Wrong sentences said out loud teach me more than correct ones left unspoken. I hold the language in my hands, awkwardly at first. That is fine. The careful side and the growing side both need time. I give both. Imperfect practice every day builds real fluency over time. Lesson 3, the first real conversation. 1 month after starting his imperfect speaking practice, Elias had his first real English conversation. It happened at work. A client from abroad came to the office for a meeting. His manager was delayed. The client was waiting in the small reception area. Elias was passing by. He stopped. 1 month ago, he would have nodded politely and walked quickly to his desk, not ready. Today, he stopped. He thought about progress, not perfection. He thought about good enough to try. He said, "Good morning. Can I get you something while you wait? Tea or coffee?" The client looked up. "Coffee would be wonderful, thank you." Simple exchange, 4 sentences total. But while he was making the coffee, the client asked him a question about the city, and Elias answered, and the client asked another question, and Elias answered that too. 7 minutes of conversation about the city, about the office, about nothing important. Elias's grammar was not perfect. He used the wrong preposition once. He paused twice to find a word. The client did not seem to notice any of it. They had a pleasant 7-minute conversation about a city and a coffee. When his manager arrived and took over, the client said to him, "Your colleague is very pleasant to talk to." Elias walked back to his desk. He sat down. 7 minutes. Wrong preposition. 2 pauses. Pleasant to talk to. Progress, not perfection, had just worked in real life. Daily English sentences. Repeat after me. I stop and I speak. Good enough to try is good enough. 7 minutes of imperfect conversation. Pleasant to talk to. Progress, not perfection, worked in a real situation today. Wrong preposition, two pauses, successful conversation, all three at once. I am pleased, not because it was perfect, but because it happened. 1 month of imperfect practice built this real moment. Every real conversation is worth more than 10 perfect practice sessions. Lesson 4, 6 months. What progress built. 6 months after his conversation with Daniel, Elias sat at his desk with his notebook. He thought about the 10 months before Daniel, the careful, methodical, perfectionist months, the English that had stayed at the same level for 7 of those 10 months because he was mastering each point before moving on. Then he thought about the 6 months after, 6 months of imperfect speaking practice every morning, 6 months of using words before he was certain of them, 6 months of having conversations, awkward, wrong preposition, two pauses conversations that had slowly, gradually become less awkward and more natural. He counted something. In those 6 months, he had spoken English to a real person on 41 different occasions. Some brief, some longer, all imperfect. Before Daniel's conversation, that number had been zero. In 10 months, zero real conversations. 41 in 6 months. And his English now, he could feel it. Not perfect, still mistakes, still moments of searching, but genuinely more natural, more flowing, more like something he lived inside rather than studied from outside. He wrote in his notebook 6 months of progress, 41 real conversations, not one of them perfect, all of them real, all of them building something. He thought about perfectionism, about how it had felt like protection from embarrassment, like from mistakes, from being seen to be imperfect. But it had not protected him, it had kept him still. For 10 months, progress had moved him. Imperfect, daily, real progress. He wrote one more line. He wrote, "Perfection was keeping me still. Progress is taking me somewhere." Daily English sentences, repeat after me, 41 real conversations, none perfect, all building something. 6 months of progress moved me further than 10 months of perfection seeking. I live inside the language now, not outside it looking in. Perfectionism kept me still. Progress took me somewhere. Not one perfect conversation, all of them real. That is what matters. Progress is always available. Perfection almost never is. I choose progress every single day for the rest of my learning. Final words, one imperfect step forward. Elias's story is simple. He was careful and precise and thorough, good qualities, but applied to English learning, they had become a trap, a comfortable, safe, completely unproductive trap. Until Daniel said one thing: there is no path to good English that goes around the bad English. And Elias started speaking badly, imperfectly, with wrong prepositions and 2-second pauses in sentences that ran on too long. And 6 months later, 41 real conversations. A client who said he was pleasant to talk to. English that felt like somewhere he lived rather than somewhere he visited. All from imperfect progress every single day. Maybe you are a perfectionist too. Maybe you wait until you are sure before you speak, until you are ready before you try, until you are certain before you use a word. And maybe because of that, you speak less than you should, practice less than you need, progress slower than you could. I want to say this simply: you do not need to be perfect to move forward. You just need to be willing to be imperfect. Say the word you are not sure of. Use the grammar you have not fully mastered. Have the conversation you are not completely ready for. Make the mistake. Get corrected. Try again. That is the path, the only path. Not around the imperfection, through it. One imperfect step forward every day. That is progress. And progress, not perfection, is what changes everything. See you in the next one. Stay calm, stay consistent, and choose progress over perfection.